Alright, welcome back to the channel. So today I published an essay called 24-Hour Economic Blackout / DEI Boycotts and Buycotts. I just published that on Medium, and this is going to be like the video essay format of that essay, just so people have like multiple sources to get information from me and consume my content. So today we're going over DEI, the executive order that Trump did, and then the consequential, boycotts and buycotts. First, what is DEI? It's an acronym for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity being the ensuring of representation of different races, genders, cultures, religions, abilities, and identities. Equity being providing fair access to opportunities and resources by recognizing and addressing systematic barriers. Then inclusion being creating general environments where these diverse individuals feel welcome, respected, and empowered to contribute to the team, to the environment. So now all of that as a whole is a framework that was designed to promote fair treatment, representation, and opportunities for individuals from historically marginalized or underrepresented groups and workplaces and schools and other organizations. And it was developed to address systematic inequalities and discrimination that have historically excluded those certain groups, particularly based in race and gender and disability and socioeconomic status, from equal participation in institutions and the workforce. Why do we need this framework implemented? Because white men specifically, were being exclusively prioritized for these positions in schools and in the workplace. Take the civil rights movement of the 1960s and laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They laid the groundwork for these equal opportunity policies, followed by affirmative action in the 1970s to the 80s, where organizations began implementing these programs to address racial and gender disparities in hiring and education. For example, racial and ethnic minorities, that was racial diversity. Women, that was gender diversity. LGBTQ plus community, that was inclusion. People with disabilities, that was inclusion by means of accessibility and accommodation. And then lower income individuals, that was financial equity. So spinning back to the people with disabilities, there's another acronym, which is DEIA, and it has that accessibility part, which Trump ends up name dropping in his executive order. But we're gonna get to that. So now that we established what DEI is, why are agencies and corporations rolling back on these DEI initiatives? That brings us over to Trump's Executive Order 14151. It's titled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing, where President Trump states the Biden administration forced illegal and immoral discrimination programs under the name DEI into virtually all aspects of the federal government. Biden had issued an executive order as well on his first day in office, which was Executive Order 13985, titled Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Undeserved Communities through the Federal Government, where nearly every federal agency and entity submitted equity action plans, to which Trump claims the public release of those plans demonstrated immense public waste and shameful discrimination, and say that ends today being January 29th of 2025. Because he says Americans deserve a government committed to serving every person with equal dignity and respect, and to expending precious taxpayer resources only on making America great. You know how he is. So this order requires federal agencies to dismantle DEI offices, cease related initiatives, and report employees involved in DEI roles to the Office of Management and Budget. Also, the Attorney General has directed the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to investigate and penalize discriminatory DEI practices among federal contractors. That includes education institutions, as they are part of the administration through the Department of Education, which launched the NDEI portal, enabling parents, students, and teachers to report discriminatory practices in schools. This initiative aims to identify areas for investigation and ensure educational practices align with the Supreme Court's decisions invalidating race-based affirmative action in college admissions. So all of this uses federal oversight, funding leverage, and legal enforcement to push schools towards eliminating DEI-related programs which some already have or tried to change like into other names. So then, how do private sector companies fit under that umbrella? While the executive order primarily targets federal entities and contractors, its influences prompted a number of major U.S. companies, especially Google, Target, Walmart, Amazon, who have government contracts and are under pressure to eliminate DEI hiring and training policies to avoid lawsuits, loss of funding, undergo federal investigation. And as for companies that are, for the people, they're rebranding or quietly, shifting their diversity efforts to focus on broader talent development initiatives instead. All right, so that leads us to the boycotts and the Buycotts. So obviously we just boycotting the companies that just flat out or even try to quietly, roll back DEI, not caring about how their consumers feel. So these boycotts are expressing, how we feel. As seen on Target's TikTok comment section, I don't know if y'all seen those. And then the Buycotts, I seen that, I don't know if it was in an article or in wherever I seen it. I just thought it was like clever. But the boycotts being us supporting companies like Costco that are, standing firm, and some companies even doubling down on the DEI initiatives. Now, the 24-hour economic blackout boycott. We as a people organized a 24-hour economic blackout on February 28th, 2025. We want everybody to abstain from all spending. Like this includes, major retailers, gas, fast food, whatever. But most importantly, the companies that roll back on the DEI initiatives and policies. This is to protest, corporate corruption and the influences of large corporations on us American workers. If you have to go shopping or whatever, like that needs to be done the day before or wait till the day after. If you need something like during, make sure like it's like either black owned, it's like local and it's in cash, because we're not feeding into any major corporations. We're also doing this to demonstrate the power of consumers. It's a picture of a guy, I'm gonna put it up. He's like, do not buy where you will not be hired. And I think it's a great start. I say start because to call it a revolution, that's a bit, of an overstatement. It is a movement, I say, but there's a discussion about micro revolutions. How every, revolutionary act doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to quickly incite a big change on a big scale, right here, right now. You could take small steps that have a butterfly effect. Micro revolutions. Have a bunch of these going on simultaneously throughout the nation. And I believe this blackout boycott falls under that micro revolution category. It is just one day, and that's why people hating or discouraging others, but it's a start, and it's on a large enough scale with like seemingly active participants for us to at least gauge what's possible. But I do agree with the sentiment of wanting it to be longer, because I know that's what will really work. Like with Starbucks, they had hella boycotts here in the US and in the Middle East. Like they've been doing boycotts in the Middle East since like October 2023 in response to the U.S. support of Israel's actions against Hamas in Gaza. But anyways, in Malaysia, for instance, Starbucks reported losses of like 15.1 million like over 6 months due to the boycott. So they do work. The financial strain from these longer boycotts work. That led Starbucks to announce layoffs, store closures, and now, February 2025, they talking about plans to lay off 1,100 employees because of the decline in sales due to the boycotts, so these longer boycotts. On top of several store closures that's been scheduled, I know in San Francisco and in Brooklyn. Now, one thing about these boycotts is like as they work, they also led to like direct actions against Starbucks locations. Like on New Year's Eve in Australia, protesters they came in, they were allegedly like intimidating staff, stealing merch, chanting anti-Israeli slogans. Similar incidents being reported elsewhere. And I don't condone the looting and destruction as a part of like any protest, because like that's when shit been taken too far and we just completely lost the plot. But yeah, that was 2023. Let's take it back to the 1950s with the Montgomery bus boycott, since everybody keep bringing that up and trying to compare it. I'm gonna be brief though. So we know It was sparked by Rosa Parks after refusing to give up her seat to a white man. The movement was led by Martin Luther King Jr. with the Montgomery Improvement Association. It lasted 381 days, just a little over a year, which resulted in the U.S. Supreme Court ruling segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. So again, you know, these longer boycotts work, and I'm going to continue to give examples. The 1960s Nashville student movement sit-ins. These were a series of like nonviolent protests led by black HBCU students to challenge segregation at downtown lunch counters. Under the guidance of people like Diane Nash, John Lewis, James Bevel, the movement used direct action and civil disobedience to expose racial injustice. Then, after facing arrest and violent backlash, the students expanded the protest into economic boycott of segregated businesses. And from that point, I want to say we should be treating these companies that roll back DEI as if they just put up a whites only sign, because that's how it feels. Like, it feels a little reminiscent of those segregated businesses. But yeah, due to their resilience, along with support from the community, this led Nashville to becoming the first major southern city to desegregate public lunch counters officially in like May of 1960. And this was a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement that helped lay foundation for future activism, like the Freedom Rides. Then we got the Birmingham Campaign in 1963. That was a strategic movement by MLK again, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that involved boycotts of segregated businesses in Birmingham, Alabama, which led to economic pressure that contributed to the desegregation of public space. Then we got the Grape boycott, and the fruit grapes. In the late 1960s into the 70s, this was led by the United Farm Workers. It was co-founded by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. With support from black activists, this aimed to improve working conditions from farm workers, including many black laborers, and with national support led to better wages and working conditions. Then still in the 70s, going on towards the 90s, the South African apartheid boycott. This was a global boycott of the South African businesses to protest apartheid. Apartheid is a system of institutionalized racism that was more than likely Elon Musk's white minority family. That's where they built their wealth from. But anyways, that boycott was led by activists like Randall Robinson and organizations like Trans Africa, which resulted in U.S. sanctions and economic pressure that helped end the apartheid in 1994. Then we got the divestment from private prisons boycott. This started in the 2010s and it's still going on. So we protesting against private prisons that profit from mass incarceration, disproportionately affecting black communities. This led to several major banks and institutions withdrawing investments from prison companies like Core Civic and Geo Group. Do your homework on the 13th Amendment and institutionalized slavery for real. Finally, we got the Not One Dime Black Friday boycott. This started in 2014 and is still ongoing. This was launched after, the police killings of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner. This is what encouraged black people to stop spending from major retailers to protest racial injustice. And this is what led to the whole, support black-owned businesses movement. So these are just, a few examples of the longer boycotts that worked, that led to something that had impact. So now as far as upcoming longer boycotts, I know we got Pastor Jamal Bryant of the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. He called for a 40-day boycott of Target. That's supposed to begin March 5th, 2025. And I also found a list circulating entitled the Economic Black Tour. So, on February 28th is the big economic blackout. March 7th through the 14th is the Amazon boycott. March 21st to the 28th is a Nestle boycott. April 7th to the 14th is a Walmart boycott. April 18th is Economic Blackout Part 2. Now, hopefully from this big economic blackout effort, we could keep that ball rolling, get more momentum and get more lengthy boycotts in the coming days or weeks or months or whatever the case is. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This was my second video. We still working on, production and audio, so bear with me. But if you want to check out the essay, anything I put up will be linked in the description, whether that was a book recommendation or an essay recommendation, all that's going to be linked. So see you guys in the next one.